Daily Mail to Politico to Drudge. This is the show that makes the news. Now, more from Aaron Klein, Investigative Radio.
I should mention that we are going to get shortly to Syria and everything that has been happening there. Also to the Israeli elections. And by the way, when I say Syria, we are going to be joined by somebody from the Kurds who's going to give us an update on what's going on in the field right now. And then also we're going to tie this all together with Benghazi. Don't forget about that. And you'll see why it's relevant a little bit later. And one of the Benghazi heroes is actually going to be on this radio show in the second hour. So stay tuned for that. Right now, again, there is no media. They're hyping a whistleblower and then moving on instead of telling us that the whistleblower got things wrong. And then this whole impeachment inquiry that was first on quid pro quo is now moving on, which kind of reminds me a little bit of the Russia hoax where it was about collusion, which I never even heard of before, and then is not a crime. But obviously we would not want the president to have colluded with a foreign entity to steal an election. But it turns out actually it was the Hillary people who did just that. And the Barr investigation into them is now a criminal probe, as I've been warning you about. And I think that ties into why the Democrats will need to change the topic. Joshua Klein of Breitbart. Let's get to Bill Taylor, who gave testimony to the impeachment charade taking place in the basement, in the dark, in secret, the Soviet-style hearings with Adam Schiff. We're now tying together some of the personalities involved in this so that we can see who and what may, and I think they are, behind what's going on. So let's go to Ukrainian ambassador, acting U.S. ambassador Bill Taylor, who shows up in the U.S. to give testimony to the Schiff's committee. Tell us, first of all, about his ties. Okay, before we get to Taylor, let's talk about the Atlantic Council. Who funds the Atlantic Council and why is it relevant? Who is their number one funder?
Yeah, so the number one funder of the Atlantic Council is none other than Burisma. And just to remind everyone what Burisma is the natural gas company, obviously, in Ukraine, the largest. The same Burisma that Hunter Biden was on the board of until actually about a couple of weeks ago, until he announced his resignation in light of the fact that his father now is running for, president. Didn't matter before when he was vice president that he was on the board, but now, ethics is somehow, very relevant and important to them. So the Atlantic Council is heavily funded by Burisma, which is Hunter Biden.
So, okay, Atlantic Council, funded by Burisma, and actually they, in 2017, they signed an agreement to sponsor them, full partner between Burisma and the Atlantic Council. And if you're scratching your heads at home thinking, why are they talking about Burisma and the Atlantic Council? Let's start with Bill Taylor, the acting U.S. ambassador, who's the star witness to Adam Schiff's impeachment madness. Tell me about Bill Taylor and his connections to the Burisma, the natural gas company in Ukraine, at the center of the whole allegations that Joe Biden and his son Hunter were involved with the phone call. That's part of what Trump wanted investigated, was Burisma. And of course, Joe Biden threatening $1 billion in aid on video. He talked about it, unless the prosecutor who was investigating his son's Burisma was fired. The prosecutor was fired. Tell us about Bill Taylor's ties to the Burisma-funded Atlantic Council.
This is important, and this goes back for a very long time. And this is another organization. It's called the U.S. Business Council on Ukraine, or the U.S. UBC, and which is heavily again funded by Burisma, actually, and he's been working with them for literally over a decade, and actually kind of not kind of, he was very deceitful in his testimony when he was giving kind of a little rundown on his background. He mentioned, for the past, different things he's been doing, since he was out of office. One of the things he mentioned, over the past 10 years, I've happened to work for, some...
Yeah, let me read the quotes. It says, in the intervening 10 years, I have stayed engaged with Ukraine, visiting frequently since 2013 as a board member of a small Ukrainian non-governmental organization supporting good governance and reform. Joshua Klein, what is the name of the small Ukrainian non-governmental organization that Bill Taylor did not name in his testimony, on which he served as an advisory board member for 9 years? What is the name of that little innocent group supporting good governance and reform? And how are they tied to Burisma, the whole natural gas company at the center of all of this? What's the name?
Well, the name itself is called the U.S.-Ukraine Business Council, and I find it funny that he also kind of, plays down the extent of how, small supposedly this organization is. I mean, they play up how big they are. In fact, they say that they represent, I believe, 200 of the biggest businesses in Ukraine, the top business people in Ukraine. So basically, the U.S.-Ukraine Business Council presents itself as, the biggest, organization in Ukraine that facilitates different funding in Ukrainian business. So this isn't a small organization. And, of course, its top funder is...
they hold many events with Burisma. And then we have the Atlantic Council, whose top funder is Burisma as well. And actually, it turns out that Bill Taylor, the acting U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, has written numerous policy pieces on Ukraine with the director of the Burisma-funded Atlantic Council. And then also Bill Taylor, who just testified, the star witness, claiming a quid pro quo, and then not having firsthand knowledge, and then apparently he admits later there is no quid pro quo. He wrote analysis pieces for the Atlantic Council, which, again, the number one funder of the Atlantic Council is Burisma. Not to be confused with the U.S.-Ukraine Business Council, which has co-hosted events with the Atlantic Council, and actually has co-hosted events with Burisma. Hold your horses, because we're now going to tie this to the dossier, to John McCain's top aide, to Schiff's own counsel, to a mysterious trip taken by an Adam Schiff staffer a few days after the whistleblower first approaches an unknown Adam Schiff staffer. You heard all of that right. And again, if I were writing fiction, I would never have written it this way because it's not believable. But every word you are hearing is 100% factual, documented, proven. Stay tuned. Deep State Conspiracy Unwind.
היא מרגישה שנפתח לה מזל, פגשה אחד גבר ורשל, והיא תלחש לו, מה היא תלחש לו, קח אותי על הגמל.